Primeval. If you're familiar with my channel, you'd know that I absolutely loved this series as a kid, with it being one of the most ambitious and interesting sci-fi show possibly ever made, with its brilliant concept of bringing creatures from the past and future into the modern world, and essentially make it a one big scavenger hunt in order to capture and return as many creatures as possible, while avoiding becoming their next meals. It was never as big as some of its competitors like Doctor Who, but it did certainly leave an impression on a lot of people, especially early YouTube, with it constantly getting AMVs and edits on YouTube. However, despite this show's relative success, there was something about it that not a lot of people seem to either know or remember. That being, it had a spin-off show set in Canada! Hey guys, it's the Pink King here, and by popular demand, we're going to be talking about Primeval's Canadian cousin, Primeval: The New World. Now, this is a bit of an odd one today, peeps, because despite me being one of Primeval's biggest fans, it was only recently that I actually managed to see some of the episodes from this spin-off, mainly because New World was a spin-off that never did as well as its predecessor. And there's a few reasons as to why that is that I'm going to be trying to figure out today. But first, what is Primeval New World even about? Well, the spin-off is basically the exact same as the OG series, but with some differences, as anomalies begin to open in Canada, with Evan Cross, a software inventor, who once stumbled upon an Albertosaurus 6 years ago that ended up killing his wife, just before the main series events take place, ends up going on to create a group of people to help him hunt down anomalies and its creatures. And just like the OG series, hijinks ensues from this. Now, when I said that it's not that different from the OG series, I really did mean it, because this show really did have the exact same formula as the original, where a random creature would show up and a team of people would go out of their way in order to deal with it. The only real difference was that it was set in Canada, which wasn't as interesting as you might have thought. I did feel like the original series definitely got more creative with the locations and what they would have the creatures do in these locations, like raptors in a mall or worms in an office building. It was stuff like that. Putting a dark spin on very normal human locations really did set a certain tone and vibe that this series just wasn't really able to capture the same, especially with how underwhelming most of the creatures are here, with a lot of the creatures here either being just okay or just a little boring, honestly. But that doesn't mean there weren't any highlights with these creatures, as there were three in particular I found to be quite interesting. The Albertosaurus, the giant beetle, and especially the Titanoboa. They were all pretty interesting, with them being very fun to watch and definitely fit the more freaky and intimidating status that you'd expect from primeval creatures. But the rest here really didn't do that much, with not many highlight-worthy moments beyond a few fights here and there. It's just a little lackluster, to say the least. And another thing that was sadly lackluster was the production. Now, I know it's a spin-off, but still, for the time it was airing, it did not look like it had a healthy enough budget. Some shots definitely looked good, but a lot of them were either too unconvincing or just bland, really. And the same with the characters, there's not a whole lot going on outside of a few backstories that felt as interesting and rich as the characters from the original series, who definitely left a much bigger impression on me at least. And speaking of the older characters, the only real overlap between this series and the original series is the fact that we get Connor here, sometimes. And despite him not really doing that much, it was definitely nice to see him again, even if it was just a little brief. But overall, the main feelings I had while watching this spin-off was how shallow it all felt. I never really got as invested in it personally as I did the original, mainly because I felt like it was just more of the same with less stuff we know. It never really did enough to make its own unique thing. to me, which is unfortunate because there was definitely potential here with doing Primeval in other parts of the world, but maybe Canada wasn't really the best option to start out with. But why did this spin-off fail? Because despite a lot of efforts being made in order to get this series off the ground, it never went past one season with only 13 episodes under its belt, with a lot of reviews for this series being rather mediocre to negative. And so Spacebell Media ultimately ended up deciding to cancel the show rather than go through all the effort again to try and crank out another season. And honestly, how did they expect this to work in the first place? Because despite with everything that happened, this series was practically doomed to fail the moment it was announced. Why, you ask? Well, it's simple. Wrong place at the wrong time. Primeval New World was released in 2012, a year after Season 5 of the original series had ended. Yeah, it was pretty safe to say Primeval was nowhere near as popular as it used to be, with the series peaking in Season 3 and slowly dying off in Season 4 to 5, due to a lot of heavy changes and less creativity being given. People simply lost interest in this show, and so Season 5 would ultimately be the final season of the series. And so, to release a spin-off of the show that did not reinvent the concept only a year after the original series had ended, was a bit of a dumb decision. And plus, throw in the fact that it was intended to be a sort of restart to the franchise for Canadian audiences, but it couldn't let go of certain aspects, like Connor, meant it had a bit of an identity crisis. Its job was meant to be something different to what came before, a fresh start, but it ultimately became too much like its predecessor, with very little to call its own, so it failed to have anywhere near the same impact as the original series did. Now, this is just my speculation, but from everything I have seen, this spin-off simply didn't do enough to justify its own existence as a soft reboot of the franchise. And in doing so, ultimately would be the thing that buries Primeval on television. Which is definitely a real shame because this series had all the tools it needed to be fun and interesting, with a lot of memorable stories under its belt and characters we could get invested in. It really had a chance to expand more on the show's brilliant concept. However, in the end, it simply did not reflect this expectation and would ultimately just become another failure. But what do you guys think? Did you enjoy Primeval the New World while it lasted, or were you as unimpressed by it as I was? I'm very interested to see what you guys have to say about this series down below in the comments. A lot of you recommended for me to talk about this series, and I want to see whether or not you guys agree with my sentiments or not. I read all of your guys' comments, so be sure to leave all of your opinions down there for me to read. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content just like this, then be sure to like the video and subscribe. Doing that not only tells me you want me to talk about Primeval more, but it helps me make videos like this even faster than it would otherwise. So, if you enjoyed the video, like it and subscribe. And with that, peeps, it's been the Pink King here, and I will see you all next time.